the liquid was oozing out from his pores, and Mahaprabhu always embraces him. And then and then at that time, he wanted to commit suicide by, he didn't want Mahaprabhu to come and embrace him in that condition. And then Mahaprabhu says, Sanatana, your body belongs to me, right? He says that. And so it is, if we can get Krishna by committing, ending our life, I would have done so many times that way. So that is very clear that, as you said in the beginning, that the perspective from the Vedic perspective, it is not something recommended at all. And so that is all I can say.
But this question was specifically about like when sometimes if someone's at the end of their life, they're in a lot of suffering, then they may offer like a lot of morphine or something that
this situation is very, it's not the same. It's, this situation is different. Yes. More on a compassionate grounds.
Right.
Which if that is done, that's a different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Subhasini's husband is actually a doctor, and he's also a very devout Hindu. Yeah. So I wonder what he may face those kinds of situations at times.
Yes, yeah, he might. But this end of life, I don't know whether that has been, they usually have a situation where if it is a very, they can't do, they usually take the patient to the hospice or something where they make them comfortable at the end. The treatment probably is withdrawn or something, and then they make them comfortable in that way. That I have heard.
Right.
Yes.
I think also every country has different laws around this as well. It's always a very controversial subject matter.
Sure. Yes.
But I mean, I think what I would say is that, if it's coming like that, it's not, as I said, not one's independent decision, but your own doctor or care or nurse is offering this as an option, then I would say it's an acceptable choice. So it's definitely not in the same category as suicide. So those are my thoughts, and thank you, Suhasini, for sharing that. That's a very nice reference, that connection with Chaitanya Charitamrita, right, where Mahaprabhu is telling Sanatan, your body belongs to me, actually. You cannot make that choice on your own. It's a very beautiful pastime. Okay, well, so those are some thoughts on that subject matter. But as I said, if anyone has heard, or perhaps has the opportunity to ask from those who may have, it would be nice if we could hear some comments that Srila Sridhar Maharaj or Gurudev have made. Divya Sharididi, do you have any thoughts on this subject matter? Are you there, Divya Sharididi? Maybe she doesn't want to comment on this. Okay. Well, if anyone else has anything they'd like to share or comment on this subject, then please speak now. It is a very delicate subject.
Yes. Vishakha, can I say something?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, I seen a case of Siddhanti Maharaj, Premik Siddhanti Maharaj, and also Gurudev
Okay.
In India for lying on the temple floor for I don't know how many months. They didn't put her misery out of there. And Gurudev waited, and then she left. by Krishna's arrangement. And Gurudev came, it was a mystical rain. Actually, I was lucky I was there.
Hmm.
We pray, we wait. They should
Who,
consult local sadhu guru.
sorry,
Should.
who are you talking about, Prabhu? Whose name did you mention?
Earlier I mentioned Premik Siddhanti
Yes.
Maharaj. Also, Srila Gurudev Govinda Maharaj, mother, I was in India when she left her body.
Hmm.
Rangini Didi, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw her. I was there, happened to be there. And she was on Nath Mandir, her body, she was just like a lump of, I don't know, bones. And
Hmm.
Gurudev waited patiently. And I don't know, some on particular day, then she left.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even Premik Siddhanti Maharaj, he was here. He was suffering so much. So I
Yes.
could feel it. I told him, stay here. But he didn't trust me. Then he asked somebody else to ask Gurudev. I knew the answer. Then Gurudev said, no, just stay there. And he stayed there, and then he was suffering so much. It was kind of hard to see.
Hmm.
Then he
Hmm.
later he left. Sanatani Didi took care of him. I tried to serve him, assist him, whatever I could. And then he, after month and a half, then he departed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like Gurudev say, wait and see. You have to, I don't know, they should consult with local Vaishnava, local devotees. Because these doctors are mostly they are, I don't know what to say, they are ignorant. They are like a mechanic.
Every situation is definitely different,
Yeah.
that's for sure. I also just remembered there was a second part to that question, which was if our chanting and prayers for someone who's, facing death, if that is helpful. And we have heard from Srila Maharaj. He has mentioned that that good wishes, they can help the departed souls. He mentioned that, if we have some purity in our heart, if there are some Vaishnavas who are praying or offering their well wishes to a departed soul, then that definitely has some potency, that has some power to uplift, right? And this is why sometimes, members in our community, they may do some Vaishnava seva on behalf of a departed soul, right? They will make some offering of prasad, right, to the devotees in their local community in the name of that departed soul. And then the good wishes, the blessings of those Vaishnavas are going to that departed soul, and that can help them in the afterlife and in their future births. So yes, I would say if we are praying and chanting for the sake of a soul facing death or a departed soul, you know, with the remembrance of our Gurudev and with the connection of our Gurudev, then yes, there will be some benefit to that, definitely. And according to the capacity and the purity of the person who is making the prayer, so much that soul will be benefited, right? Will be uplifted. So those are my thoughts on that subject matter. We had another question. Well, we have a few other questions. One question which I didn't get a chance to answer last week, and I don't want to forget it, was someone had some confusion about the Brahma Jyoti, right? Or Brahman, right? Which we hear from our gurus, and this is discussed in Brahma Samhita and other scriptures, that there are in general three zones of reality, right? There is this plane of worldly dynamic material plane, let's say. This is the world of dynamic material existence, right? Where the souls pursue their various independent desires, right? And therefore are subject to the wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth and death, and so on. And then on the higher side, there is the dynamic spiritual plane. So there's the dynamic material plane, and then there's the dynamic spiritual plane, which is based on eternal truth and loving relationship with the absolute in various forms, right? There, within that spiritual dynamic plane, which we can call Vaikunta in a broad sense, there are so many zones within that plane also. Krishna, we see as the being at the top, being the origin, but then so many other avatars, they also have their zone within that dynamic spiritual plane. And they are, in all of these manifestations of the Lord, they're engaging in infinite loving relationships with a great multitude of souls, living and acting with their eternal spiritual bodies, right? So there are those two zones. And then there's also this middle zone, which we refer to as the Brahman, right? And Brahman literally means greater than the greatest and always becoming greater, right? And the word, and it's also referred to as the Brahma Jyoti, right? Jyoti means light, right? So the word Brahma also means, it can be used to simply mean spirit or spiritual. So Brahma Jyoti, this plane of light and consciousness and pure spirit, right? And of course, in many schools of thought, that's seen as like the ultimate. And it's only in the Vaishnava school that there's recognition of that third zone of a dynamic spiritual plane, right? In many schools of thought in India, outside of India, there's, of course, awareness of this plane, this dynamic material plane. And then there's an awareness of there being some hazy, after existence, some hazy divine plane beyond, but there isn't so much clarity as to what that is, right? And so so it is in the Vaishnava school that there is awareness of that third dynamic plane where we can have an active, dynamic, loving relationship with a personal feature of the Lord, right? And so then what is that Brahman, right? We speak about it in one sense as just being this plane of light and consciousness, but then the Vaishnavas, their vision is that is simply the effulgence of Krishna. Oh, and by the way, welcome, Marie. Really lovely to have you with us. We've missed you. And Krishna and Johnny Didi also joined us. Welcome. Hello, Marie. I'm here with Suvasani Didi. We were thinking of you the other day because we visited a pilgrimage site of Marian devotion a few days ago. Our Lady's Island here in Ireland. So what is, because remember, from the Vaishnava perspective, and especially in Krishna Bhakti, everything is personal. So what is that great expanse of light? It's just the effulgence coming off of Krishna's body, right? And so I think the confusion the questioner had was, what is this Brahman? Because she was reading some descriptions of it being a part of Krishna, and then other places it's being referred to in more of an abstract and impersonal way. But both are true, right? That Brahman is actually a part of Krishna. And to merge into that light coming off of Krishna's body, that is one type of liberation, right? So yes, from our vision, it is the light coming from Krishna's body. That is what the Brahma Jyoti is. And ultimately everything's floating within that light. Everything is encompassed within that light. And I'm trying to remember, there's a very nice line from the scriptures our Gurudev liked to quote. Do you remember that one? The Sham, I can't remember. Jyotir, that's it. Jyotir, very nice line. I think in the Upanishad somewhere. Jyotir abhyantare rupam atulam shama sundaram. It's saying, it's wonderful. It's saying, beyond that white light is that dark, beautiful, dark Lord. beyond that white light is that black Lord, Sham Sundar, right? Sham is referring to his black color, Sundar, beautiful. So beyond that white light is that beautiful black Lord, dark Lord, Krishna, right? If you really go deep into that light, what will you find? You will find that that light has an origin, that has a source, and it is coming from the divine form, the divine body of Krishna. That is what this great, it's kind of, I mean, it's a little humorous even, you could say, from one perspective. There's so much speculation and uncertainty and mystique surrounding this great Brahman. But for us, it's just the light coming from Krishna's body. Very simple, very sweet. We had a nice talk the other day, how, there's within the, some areas of, some lines of Hindu religion, there's almost like a celebration of this uncertainty, which is beautiful too. There are so many different schools of thought. Like some have kind of like this hard line, like the Shankara school, right? Like we are all God, we are all light particles of consciousness, and we are all God, and we all come from that plane, and we want to return to that plane, and so on. It's like they have a very clear, hard cut philosophy. That's the end, and that's the goal, and so on. But then there are also many others who kind of celebrate this not knowingness. Like you'll meet some and you ask them, so what is your opinion? Like what is the ultimate being? What is the absolute and its ultimate expression? And they'll simply very happily say, we don't know. And they're very, very happy about that. Yes, and the thing is that the Vedas also, they encourage this type of idea too. There is this vagueness, which is nice in a way, because it makes everything more inclusive, right? There is in the beginning in the Vedic text, there's no hard line about anything, but there is this vagueness about the nature of that divine spirit. It's like, there's this great beyond, but what exactly that is, we don't know. And that's okay. And there's room for whatever you think, So there's this wonderful inclusiveness, right? But then according to our heart's necessity, and that's when we were talking about, and actually it's funny because I was talking with Suvasini Didi the other day about the first verse of the Chatur Shloki in Bhagavad Gita, these 4 principal verses of Bhagavad Gita. And the first one, Aham Sarvasva Prabhavo, this is chapter 10, verse 7 or 8. What is it? 8. Yeah. 10:8 of Bhagavad Gita. Aham Sarvasva Prabhavo. And this verse is very interesting. Ananda Krishna, he asked me about this verse too. Like the day after, he mentioned that he wanted to hear more about this verse. But this verse is very interesting because it's actually marking this transition point of having this kind of like hazy awareness of what is that Brahman, right? What is that absolute? There's this haziness surrounding that. And then the sadhaka, the practitioner, is going deep into meditation, right? They're very strict in their spiritual practices, austerities, and so on. And they're going deep into their meditation with the aid of various yogic practices. But then when because of their sincerity, then they're actually coming in touch, right? There's this deeper hunger that comes up within them. Like, what actually is the source of this, right? So then going deep into their sincere meditation, they receive a touch of that personal source of that great Brahman. And then feeling that personal touch and feeling the beauty of that person, that divine personality, feeling the beauty and the charm of that divine personality, then where do they naturally go from there? Oh, I want to love this being. I want to give love, and I want to receive love. I want to serve this great being. That's the automatic feeling that will come, right? So really what it comes, our spiritual search, it actually comes down to our own inner hunger, on our own inner need, right? And there's accommodation for us at whatever stage we are at, right? So in that sense, from that perspective, there is no wrong. It's all right. It's simply, how hungry are you? That's the real question. How hungry are you? How much need do you have for a connection with the infinite, with the absolute, right? How deep do you want to go? How deep do you need to go, right? That's really what the question is. And then at every stage, there will be reciprocation. At every stage, there is food for you. And so, yes, to be in that, so the Brahman aspect it's a very wonderful aspect for those who feel the need for that type of interfacing with the absolute. That's also a very beautiful thing, that celebration, that worshiping, that connection with this Brahman, great light consciousness aspect of the divinity. But then at a certain point, one may feel a deeper hunger. Oh, but I need something more, right? I want to connect in a deeper way. I want to connect every aspect, because this is another thing, right? If we are connecting with the Lord in different phases of his existence, there's some limitation generally as to how much we can connect, right? Like if we're celebrating the Brahman aspect, if we're worshiping the Brahman aspect, you can only go to a certain point. There can be this kind of distant worship of that aspect, but you can play football, right? Your desire for play, your desire for deep love, your desire to give every facet of your consciousness, every movement, there's no space for that type of reciprocation, right? The type of love you may have for your children, the type of love you may have for your husband, type of love you may have for your mother, and so on. This type of deep, intense love, you can't have that with the Brahman aspect, right? And so many other expressions and moods that God appears in. So this is what is unique and special about the Krishna conception, that there is scope for connecting on every level, right? Where every single aspect, every phase of our existence, every strand of consciousness, every impulse we may have mentally, physically, verbally, there is a place for that to be reciprocated with in connection with Krishna, right? So I think I went a little bit beyond what this question actually was, but I hope that answers. Yes, the Brahman, it is this great zone of light consciousness, but it is also the effulgence coming from Krishna's body. It is both at the same time. Then let's see, then another question that came in anonymously was about and of course, this is something that does come up every now and again. It's not the first time, but it's always relevant somehow. And that is how do we understand the difference between humility and low self-esteem, right? And I think it is especially relevant in modern humanistic society. And I feel it's a bit of a backlash to previous times and of course in many parts of the world it is still very much like that. There's more of a rigid social hierarchy, right, which ultimately and largely is based on exploitation and ego, right? And so because of that, there is a modern backlash, right? And there's this whole idea of being independent, thinking for yourself, being confident, taking care of number one, right? All these types of ideas are very pervasive now. There's a celebration of this type of independent, superior right, type of positioning of oneself, right? That, I'm the best, I'm number one. This type of view is actually encouraged, right? In many in common rhetoric, that type of mentality is promoted, right? And so then, so then, like, looking through that lens, this like modern humanistic lens at our Vaishnava culture, humility, tolerance, honoring others without expecting a return, it looks a little strange, right? It looks unhealthy. It looks like you need to go see a therapist, right? Why are you so down on yourself? Right? It's not comfortable, right? There's this very nice line. It's so nice, this one, the introduction to Brahma Samhita that was written by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. The English is very difficult, but if you can patiently and slowly go through it with the aid of a dictionary, and it's absolutely brilliant. And there are some real gems in there. But one of them, which is very nice, is he mentions this, and it's kind of surprising too, because it's like he's writing in this very highly literate and educated, sophisticated way. But then it also is very like human and on the ground too. And then there's this one line that really strikes your heart, that he mentions the uncomfortable feeling that can come about when the mention of God comes up. Isn't that wonderful? The uncomfortable feeling, like, can get awkward. Like in certain circles, if you mention God, it's like, oh, back up, like, hey, we were cool, we were cool. Now why are you mentioning this? And you hear that expression, right? Don't talk about religion or politics at the dinner table, right? It's like, it's a taboo, right? It's a bit of a taboo. So I feel also that, if we talk about this whole idea of humility, it also, like, if you bring that up in certain circles, it's like, oh, that's a little awkward. Like, oh, why didn't you just be humble? It's like, oh, that's a little strange, and suddenly things get awkward, right? So yeah, so someone mentioned, actually, I don't know how much I should go into the background. Maybe I shouldn't go into the background, actually. But anyhow, this is the core of the issue here. How do we reconcile, right? How do we reconcile modern conceptions of independence, self-confidence, and so on? How do we reconcile that with the Vaishnava, or in general, religious view on encouraging humility and so on, right? And it looks like Marie has made a nice comment in the chat. Very nice. I like that comment. Nothing builds confidence like discovering a new little glimmer of your true self and realizing how that spark is valued by infinite divinity. Very nice. Very nice. Beautiful. And welcome. We had Axel join us. We have, Kanakalata is joining us from South Palace. So nice to have you with us. Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu has joined us from Portugal. Very nice to have you all. And also Julian. Julian's also joined us from California. Wonderful. So how do we reconcile these two things? Because actually they don't need to be in conflict, right? They don't need to be in conflict. And being humble does not mean being insecure about oneself. Being humble does not mean being a doormat. No. Being humble does not mean having low self-esteem, and so on. These are separate matters. Right? And what humility means is that we have an awareness of our own position within the whole, right? Because like, what is ego? What is arrogance? It's when we have an inflated sense of our own self and our own position to the point where we cannot hear others. We're not hearing the space around us. We're not hearing the words, the feelings of others, because our own noise is so expanded. So we're inflating our own position. That is arrogance, right? And the more that we can zoom out and see, like, not just our immediate circle of persons and situations around us, but within the world, within the universe, within the whole of existence in its entirety, zoom out further, recognizing the existence of God, first of all, and our relationship with God, and the awareness of so many others' relationship with God, right? I would say that is humility, to have this type of healthy awareness of what is our part within the whole, right? Now, if one has that type of awareness, what will naturally accompany that? There will be a meekness, right? There will be a feeling of sensitivity, right? You're not moving in an aggressive way, putting your own interests over others, but you're moving in a humble, in a meek way, being sensitive to others and to the needs of others, to the thoughts of others, and so on. And primarily from a spiritual perspective, what is the will of God? What is the will of the divine, right? Because that is our deepest connection and our deepest purpose, to connect with that. So when we have that type of awareness, we could describe it as a healthy feeling of smallness. I like to give the example too, and then another. So that's one way in which we could understand humility, like seeing ourselves within the relativity of the whole, seeing our actual position within the whole, and moving with this awareness of that and sensitivity to that, right? Then another angle on humility we were discussing earlier is when we are actually feeling our connection with divinity, right? And feeling the wonder and the beauty of that, and feeling our own smallness next to that. But you see, it's not something depressing or pessimistic. It's actually a wonderful thing. And I like to give the analogy, like if you're standing in front of a mountain, you're standing in front of a great, beautiful mountain, huge mountain in front of you, and feeling so small in front of that. And our Guru Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he has this very nice expression, right? He says it like this, Srila Sridhar Maharaj: humility is the outcome of feeling proximity to greatness. Feeling proximity to greatness. So just like when you're standing in front of that great mountain, you're feeling very small, but it's a wonderful feeling. It's not a depressed feeling. It's not a sad feeling. It's not a pessimistic feeling. It's not something that makes us feel insecure, like, oh, darn, I'm never going to be as good as that mountain, I'm so tiny and insignificant. That's not how you feel. You feel overwhelmed by the greatness and the wonder of life. And you feel so happy that there are so many things that are greater than yourself. Like, what a wonderful thing that is. Someone a few weeks ago, it was James, actually, he's not with us today, but I think he was trying to read Brahma Samhita, and he was struggling a bit with some of the concepts and the language, and he was asking me some questions about it. And he said, but actually, how nice it is to know that there are such, advanced ideas and sentiments which are, beyond my comprehension right now. Like, it's very nice to know, like, something so great and developed and refined is there, and I'm not actually, developed enough to be able to appreciate it fully. He thought that's a very wonderful thing, and I thought, oh, what a nice sentiment that is, that I'm living in a world that's full of so much wonder, that's so much greater than myself, that I'm not even able to appreciate it or understand it. Like, what a wonderful thing, actually. That's a very honest feeling to have, right? So, a healthy feeling of smallness and feeling one's connection with the infinite, right? That's a very joyful thing, and that's a happy thing. Let me see. I made a couple notes on that. Oh yeah, another thing. Well, I kind of touched on this before, but I like this point very much. Srila Sridhar Maharaj makes this point too, where he refers to humility. He gives this in one place, he gives this explanation of humility, which means being accommodating and flexible with others. He says, I will not be so rigid so as to not be able to accommodate others. He gives that as one definition of humility, right? Which I touched on earlier, and having this sensitivity in regards to others. That is also an expression of humility, right? So it is actually a very, very beautiful thing, and it is a very natural thing, this feeling of humility. It is very wholesome, right? To be humble is to be wholesome and to be self-aware and God-aware on a higher level, right? That is what humility is. But low self-esteem, insecurity, those are all different expressions of ego, actually. It's like we think of arrogance, right? Pride as being very egoistic. But being insecure, that's just the other side of the coin. They're actually two different expressions of pretty much the same thing, right? They're all different expressions of mundane ego. It's like, someone may have a superiority complex, somebody else may have an inferiority complex. They're both complexes, right? They're both unhealthy. They're both abnormal and they both need help, right? So humility, inferiority, feelings of inferiority and low self-esteem and so on, those are two very different things, right? And to be humble doesn't mean that one is not confident, right? One may have a great degree of self-confidence, but they're also humble at the same time. They may have a clear awareness of what they can do and what they can't do, and they're moving with confidence in their actions in the world, but they're doing so with self-awareness, with humility, with respect for others. It's actually a very beautiful and noble way to live, right? And our Gurudev actually, he was, like the number one promoter of these principles of humility, tolerance, and respect. But he also spoke on many occasions of the need to be confident, right? To be confident in ourselves. And the point is, especially if we're seeing from a spiritual perspective, that, we're feeling, when we feel our connection with divinity, right? We're connecting with the infinite, right? We are finite, we are small on our own, but if we have a connection with the infinite, then all possibility is before us, right? And we cannot underestimate the power that can come through that link with the infinite. We are finite, but we have a link with the infinite. So infinite power, infinite strength, infinite capacity can come to us, right? And there's a confidence that will come from that. There's a self-assurance that will come from that connection with above, right? So it's a big subject matter. There's so much else that could be said, but maybe I'll stop with that. I also think that, often the most insecure people, they may be ones who, they try to compensate for their feelings of insecurity. And so they may be overly confident, overly loud, they may appear a little arrogant and so on. But at the base of it, there's this deep insecurity. But on the other hand, a humble person, they may be a truly humble person. They may be very comfortable with themselves. They don't feel the need, to be on the front, to be on the stage, right? They don't have a need to be number one. They know their own worth. They're comfortable with themselves. They don't need everyone to know their glory, right? It's like there's that old English expression, this is going a little bit another direction, but it's related. The eagle suffers what is it? The eagle suffers the sparrow to sing, something like that, like that a great powerful eagle, who is, very mighty in the bird kingdom, it will be quiet when the little birds want to show off, The eagle knows it's actually very powerful. It doesn't need to sing about it and show off, It's like, it's a very funny phenomenon. Probably some of you have noticed that you notice it's always the little dogs that bark the loudest. It's a very consistent thing I've noticed. The big dogs, they're very comfortable with themselves. They're chill. But anytime you go by like a little tiny dog, it's yapping around your feet, it's trying to show itself to be very powerful, they have some type of insecurity complex, right? So they have to compensate for that. But the dogs that are actually big and powerful, they're chill. They know their power, they're comfortable with that. They don't need to let everybody know about it. They're actually feeling it, right? So it is that type of idea, when we're actually comfortable with ourselves and feeling our own connection, with God, with the infinite, feeling the power behind that, then we don't need to make a song and dance about who we are. We don't need to talk about being number one, but we're comfortable in who we are in our relationship with divinity. So those are my thoughts on that subject matter, and I hope that they're helpful. But I understand, why there can be confusion around that. Then lastly, there is a fourth question, which I don't know. It's a very nice question. This is from Mahaprabhu. Going into some higher subject matter, which I don't know, maybe we should wait till next week, because I might want to talk a bit more on that. But let's see, does anyone in the meeting here have any comments or related questions to what we just discussed, and we can see whether we go into another avenue.
I have a question.
Okay.
Following your thoughts about the humility, be humble. In the society that we live, sometimes there are some people that abuse. We are humble. We are fighting to be humble, to be in this position, to look. But there are some people that take I don't know how to say it, take the advantage that you are quiet, is no be loud, and use to try to the opposite. Someone try to I know I have to be humble, quiet, but how I deal with this kind of situation, may I express that?
That's
you understand
I'm really, really happy that you brought that question up, because that's a very important related point. And the answer is that, you're absolutely right, and we should not let ourselves be taken advantage of. Of course, it does also depend on the individual, and we should not try to follow a level of humility that is not real for us, right? Like for example, we hear about Haridas Thakur, right? Great Vaishnava saint who he was so extreme that when he was being beaten by these, Muslim officials, he pretended to die to help them out, right? Because these officials were beating him, trying to kill him. They were whipping him, right? Or caning him. But he wasn't dying because of his spiritual power, and they were becoming very anxious. Oh, we're going to be in trouble because we can't kill him. And Haridas Thakur was so deep in his compassion and so deep in his connection with the Lord that he was completely undisturbed by their, horrible mentality and their cruelty. And he actually pretended to die in order to help them, right? And so he went into some unconscious state, and then they threw him into the Ganges and so on. And so that's something that we appreciate and we worship, we bow down to, but we cannot imitate that. That would be very unhealthy for us. We cannot pretend to be at a level that we are not, right? And that's not appropriate for us. And so, we have to move in a way that we can protect ourselves and move in a harmonious way in society. And I like very much the example of Sanatan Goswami, because Sanatan Goswami, he's such a great devotee, he's such an important acharya for us, but you also see he was very streetwise. And there are some descriptions in Chaitanya Charitamrita where he's bribing the jailer, right? He's telling different stories to the king and others because he's trying to become free from the government employment. And so he has to do all kinds of things, and he's bribing, he's telling lies, white lies. He's not gonna go and tell his whole story to someone who wants to cheat him, but he's seeing how the world works. And he's adapting to that, right? He's being realistic and practical about the situation, right? He's not going to the jailer and saying, "Oh, please, I need to go to Mahaprabhu." But he tells a whole story about he needs to go to Mecca, and then he offers him a lot of money, and and then later on also he has another situation where he meets some people running a hostel, and they want to kill him for his money, right? And Sanatan also has to deal with that situation in a very diplomatic and a very clever way, So I like his example very much, because even though he's such a great devotee, he's also being very realistic and practical about the situation that he's in, And, we have this English expression, don't throw pearls before swine. You probably have an equivalent in Portuguese, right? You don't show your vulnerability, you don't show your real worth to someone who cannot appreciate that, right? And so I think, yes, and my mother talks about this too, it's like when you go out into the world, you have to put on a bit of an armor, right? You have to put on your shield, and you have to face the world in a certain way, But you also maintain, your inner mood of a Vaishnava, of practicing Vaishnavism, right? Aspiring, for Vaishnava ideals. So there are two, we're keeping these different layers, right? We have to engage with the world in a certain way. We don't want to let people take advantage of us, because that will just be a loss of energy. Why do we want to lose our energy, to such people? So yes, it's a very, very good point that you have brought up. And it does mean things can be a little complex sometimes, because and I think probably a lot of devotees make this mistake, because we want to be open with everyone, right? We want to share our heart with everyone. We want to have honest and loving dealings with everyone. But we learn often the hard way that that's not possible, right? And so then we need to adjust, to the situation. And we can remember too, it is also relevant that Mahaprabhu, when he gives that advice to Rupa and Sanatan, they have the most horrible job, having to work for this horrible Muslim ruler who's destroying Hindu temples and so on. And they want to leave their work and come and stay with Mahaprabhu. But in the beginning, Mahaprabhu doesn't allow them, and he sends them that cryptic message telling them, he gives the example of a married woman who has a secret lover, right? And he says, a married woman who has a secret lover, she will very perfectly carry out all her household duties. But in her heart, she's always remembering the joy of being with her lover, right? And so Mahaprabhu gave that analogy, and our gurus have also repeated it, right? That in a similar way, we may have to deal with the world in different ways, face the world in different ways, and have different duties we have to take on. But in our heart, we're cultivating our real identity, our spiritual identity, and our spiritual connection. So it can be a bit of a tricky balancing act, maintaining these two aspects. But it's necessary, to survive for most persons, most devotees. So yes, very, very good question. Very good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you for your answer. It's clarified a lot.
Oh, I'm glad. Okay, we're just about at the end of our time. Does anyone else want to add any related comments or short question related okay, Mahaprabhu says he was going to ask the question, and Mahaprabhu, I promise we will. His question was very, very nice, actually. It was about why, if I recall correctly, it was about why Mahaprabhu chose to spend his last years in Puri, and there is some deep significance surrounding that. But it, as I said, it is a deep and high subject matter. We want to give it justice, give the question justice. So I think next week maybe we can start with that. Okay, well, it's been another wonderful gathering with all of you. So Vasuni, did you any last comments you want to share with our group today?
No, there's about the humility, couple of things I just was thinking, examples, examples. One is like Guru Maharaj was talking about, being humble, but humble to whom, actually? It's not like, it's not you can be humble to, any madman on the street, it's not that way. So, and so you have to understand where you have to put the humility, that is one thing. And also, there's one, he talks about Hanuman also, Hanuman is like, he's a great devotee, actually, and he is actually seen to destroy, the Lanka. He goes and, it's, then, can we say that, he is not humble or, like that? Can't point like that, where his service is, he's doing that service, actually. So that is, you have to remember that humility. And also, I remember one nice story, which is, I don't remember the whole story, but Narada Muni, one time, he meets this, the serpent. Do you remember that snake?
No.
So this snake, they had some interaction, I don't know, with a snake, and this snake, nobody, like everybody afraid of snake, and and the snake is saying that some things he's sharing. But you have to. So the Narada Muni is saying that can't remember the whole how it came about. But the end, the Narada Muni talks to the snake to be not to be doing, frightening people and all that, and then after some time, Narada Muni comes back and then sees what happened to that snake, and they were all, throwing stones, and it's almost dying, kind of, And Narada Muni said, "What happened?" He said, you said, being like not to do like what he was doing before, frightening everything. So I was not doing anything. Narada Muni says, it is, you don't have to go and bite anybody, but you can take your hood and show that, you're a snake and they will run away, At least you can do that, It is not that. So it is not like unnaturally doing something, which is like, it is your you have to protect your own thing that, that is something like that. So you have to protect that. You have to show at least your, that don't to be vulnerable to
Right.
that. Well, I mean, I can't express.
We can also say common sense goes a long
Yeah,
way,
common
right?
sense. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Common sense. Don't be humble to the point of losing your common sense. Thank you, Suvasini Didi. And so many lovely comments in our chat. Really lovely to be here with all of you. So I guess we'll stop there for today. Srinath, you want to say hello to our friends? So Suvasini's son, our dear brother Ananda Krishna's there. He's waving to you.
Hi, I see you. Good to see you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for your livening association. It's really always keeping me alive. And wishing you an inspired, joyful week ahead. Look forward to next week.
Yeah, dandavats to everyone. My dandavats.
Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Maharaj ki Jai. Vaishnava Govinda ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanand Devi. Haribo.
Haribo, Haribo.
Okay.